Hello, I'm Rachael Babin from the Oncology podcast. I'm here with Simone, Leyden, CEO and co-founder of Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia, which you may remember used to be called the Unicorn Foundation. We are joined by Dr. Aviral Singh, who is a specialist nuclear medicine physician from Germany and clinical research and development manager for GenesisCare. He practices Theranostics for the management of neuroendocrine neoplasms and prostate cancer. Today we're chatting about the recently held Theranostics Roundtable virtual meeting and exploring the future role of Theranostics for the management of NETs. As always, you'll find links in the notes on our website. For regular news and podcast updates, subscribe to the Oncology newsletter for free on oncologynews.com.au. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy today's episode. This is Rachael Babin, and this is the Oncology podcast. Hi, Simone. Hi, Aviral. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Rachael and Aviral. So nice to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Hi, Rachael. Hi, Simone. And thank you for this opportunity to speak about Theranostics today.
Simone, I always like to start with a personal question, if I may. Can you talk us through why you founded Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia with your brother?
As always, with some of these patient organisations, it does come from a place where we have been affected. My sister was diagnosed in 2005 with pancreatic neuroendocrine cancer that had metastasized through to her liver at the ripe old age of 29 years old. And I guess that really set the tide of what our family then started going through in relation to trying to find out what is this cancer and what is this disease and what are the treatments and what support do we have, and all those questions that come through, and especially when you get the diagnosis of an incurable, inoperable cancer as well, and also told that you're probably one of the only ones in Australia to have this. So that said about our journey, and luckily, as you mentioned, my brother John is a doctor, he's an anaesthetist, and he at least was able to navigate the system and really be able to try and find the best doctors, find the best specialists, and actually also try and get access to medicines that potentially she may not have been able to get access to. And through that, we really realised that, whilst we could do this, what about all those families out there that didn't know how to navigate the system and felt really isolated and alone? So we launched Unicorn Foundation in 2009. We've really evolved into funding clinical trials, advocating for access to Theranostics in particular, and we also provide support through telehealth nurses as well.
Telehealth specialist support nurses, that's an incredible achievement. That must make a real difference to patients going through that journey who just don't know where to start.
It's huge. It really is. And I guess, that was one of the key things that we did when we were able to fundraise. It really allowed people from all around Australia and actually all around the globe. We'd get phone calls from everywhere, just again, trying to say, who do we see? What is this disease? Can you explain it to me? So, even simply just setting up a website back in 2009 with vetted, easy to understand information was absolute key. And then, being able to help them, again, I keep saying navigate the system, but if we didn't help patients try and do that, they really, unfortunately, their outcomes were a lot poorer. Definitely.
How about you, Aviral? I think everyone has a fascinating story to tell. What was your inspiration?
Well, this certainly is an interesting question. My interest in oncology has developed over the years of my medical education, clinical training, and mainly following interaction with patients and their families. Having worked in diverse backgrounds, I also realized that there was a mystery and secrecy surrounding the diagnosis of cancer, a social taboo per se in certain cultures and societies. This limited open discussions about the social and demographic burden of disease had limited the options for patients to go out and actively seek treatment options. This in contrast to the possibilities that I've had while working in more open and advanced medical environment. And just for the information, I best admit I have worked and trained myself in Ukraine, in the UK, Australia, Germany, and now back in Australia in 3 different languages. So that, of course, has given me the opportunity to look at the perspectives of patient care in different healthcare systems. And currently working in places like the UK, Australia, and Germany, I've also had the possibility to pursue cutting edge research in my chosen specialty, which has then inspired and motivated me to pursue Theranostics as it is of today.
What's the Theranostics landscape like in Ukraine?
Next to none, I would say. So, to be honest, as a medical student, we have probably not heard of neuroendocrine tumors as such. You would hear different terminologies, like the really old terminologies. Carcinoid, you would hear things like new growths or tumors not classified, and different kinds of terms where they were told, well, you have this disease. We have seen a growth, a tumor. Histologically doesn't look like anything which we see often. So we do not have treatment options. We can surgically remove and then you're on your own. And in Germany, I still get patients from that part of the world. I mean, it is now a more understanding or a more, I would say, developing field. They're just getting access to it and they're more involved. But at the time, it was next to nothing terminology.
Fascinating. I like how you spoke about the mystery of cancer. And I guess it's always a mystery. There's always something that we have to unravel, whether it's finding the right information for a rare diagnosis, as Simone was saying. But it really is quite sobering to think about how big that mystery must be in countries where, as you say, they don't even have the same terminology in place in education.
When we were studying medicine, and although we had an oncology clinic or center at the level of state hospital, on the medical records or files of patients, they never wrote the real diagnosis. It was written disease of the stomach, disease of the intestine, disease of the lungs, and so on. So this taboo or mystery was such that it was not out into the open for people to actually actively speak about.
Wow, it's very powerful. Reminds me of a family story, actually, way back in like the 1940s or the 1950s in the UK, where women with terminal diagnoses, breast cancer, cervical cancer, just simply weren't told. Doctors and their husbands would decide, no, it will be too stressful. Gosh, it really does show you how far we've come along. There's still a long way to go. Simone, could you talk us through the roundtable now and what its overall goals were?
Theranostics has evolved, and as Aviral's talked about, his experience there, and especially with neuroendocrine tumours, this is a treatment of not only imaging, but obviously then the targeted therapy afterwards that has been used with neuroendocrine tumours with success for many, many years. So whilst we have had the benefit of that, we haven't had necessarily great access to that. And it was the thought here, and as these innovations are changing, is the system set up to keep up with that? Is the HTA system set up for that? Is the hospital system, is the payment reimbursement system, everything, is it set up for that? So I actually did look at what our colleagues were doing. We work obviously very closely with our European friends, and they had a lot going on with SPARC, which is a senior sort of stakeholder group that were taking it to European Parliament and looking at what they were doing, and really wanted to obviously put that into the Australian landscape here as well. So the goal was to bring together as many stakeholders that would have a part of achieving the goal of greater access to these innovative technologies. And that included policymakers, clinicians, researchers, academics, patients, being brought together by a patient organisation such as Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia. We really had that flexibility of bringing everybody together evenly and equally, I think, as well, trade and industry partners as well, and to really have everybody have a seat at the table, chat about the issues at hand, talking about the issues, also talking about the opportunities, and then obviously really trying to find some solutions. It came on the back of also last year we had a House of Reps inquiry into access to innovative technologies, which was a bipartisan inquiry here at a federal level, where many of us made submissions, and many of us in our space made submissions specifically around Theranostics and what that future looked like. So the key goals, I think, if you like, were to really ensure that we started the conversation and that we had this multi-sectorial approach, and we really start looking at these key strategic challenges of workforce, of supply, working with our key areas like ANSTO in actually manufacturing and also our industry partners as well. And from a patient perspective, how can we ensure that the best clinical trials happen here in Australia so that our patients can access it? We know what's coming with prostate, breast, lymphoma, ovarian. We don't want to set and forget sort of system that we've had potentially in the past. This needs to evolve as more and more cancers will see the benefit of Theranostics.
As Theranostics use in larger tumour streams like prostate cancer, breast cancer becomes more widely known, then perhaps we'll see a big investment. But we can't wait that long.
Most of our clinicians were probably really thought as mad professors a lot of the time. Sorry, Aviral. But, that unfortunately it was that they were just concocting these things and concocting these targeted therapies. But as we see it going into more mainstream or common cancers, we are seeing that there is a lot more interest. And whilst that's great, flying the flag of the rare and less common cancers, want to ensure that, we're not forgotten and that the system adequately caters for both, because really the therapy and how it's given to patients with these very heterogeneous tumours such as neuroendocrine tumours is very different to those more common cancers. So we want to have that conversation as well, is that we want access, but we want really good access as well.
So do you think that workforce is the main challenge?
Yes. And what does that workforce look like? And also, what are these clinical care guidelines going to look like as well? When you probably open it up to more patients and more patients wanting access to it and more industry investment in it, you are going to get a lot more different specialties wanting to get involved in that, and no doubt. And I think radiologists and all sorts of things, there's a discussion around, where does this fall? Obviously, in our world, it still falls in nuclear medicine. And I think that is the ideal because of the experience, because of the specialty and also because of the years and years of experience and training. But it is also that, we must be nimble. And I think what's the most important thing with this workforce discussion is that the patient is treated by the most experienced person, not a person who potentially does a bit of a certificate over a weekend. That is absolutely going to, I think, put Theranostics back all the years that they've made up with, all the innovations that they've done. I think that could really have have a damaging effect. And so for us personally, ideally, we would like to still see it within nuclear medicine. And again, even with neuroendocrine cancers, we'd still like to see it in specialist centres.
And what would you comment, Aviral?
So I would actually concur with that, because having worked at one of the largest ENETS accredited Center of Excellence at Central Clinic Bad Berka for several years, what I've seen the importance of this multidisciplinary approach, the importance of really experienced clinicians, surgeons as well, and we are not just talking about the primary tumor. We are talking here about, say, when a patient develops carcinoid heart disease. We've had patients from North America who could not actually find a suitably experienced cardiothoracic surgeon to do the heart valve replacement surgery in such patients, for which our cardiothoracic surgeons, have an extensive experience. And this in turn relates to the survival or the progression-free survival of the patients. And at our center, they were doing a minimally invasive approach for these surgeries. They were not doing open heart surgeries either. So I think it is important. We also had interventional radiologists who could intervene with intra-arterial approach for treatment, which we've done. I know SIRT, or selective internal radiotherapy, is practiced in Australia as well. A good center with a lot of experience providing a wholesome care to these patients is absolutely important. And also the nursing and allied healthcare staff who understand the needs of these patients. And what is even more interesting is that we in Germany treated these patients as inpatients, whereby we were actually running oncology wards for these patients as a nuclear medicine physician. Of course, we were supported by these brilliant specialists who were involved in patient care with regular MDTs, consults, patient reviews, and everything that an advanced center for neuroendocrine tumor should be able to provide. So I absolutely concur with Simone that this is very important to be treated at such centers. However, I must say that for future, we have to expand and educate people outside the sphere of centralized, institutions, at least for some follow-up care and pay even for regular care when people have to travel large distances. However, yes, the prime care should be regulated and monitored by a major center.
Absolutely, Aviral. We have 2 ENET centres of excellence in Australia, which is amazing for our population, at Royal North Shore and at Peter Mac. But that multidisciplinary approach and the link between oncology and nuclear medicine and surgery and endocrinology and everything, I think it is quite unique. And the shared care models, I couldn't agree with you more, because especially in a country the size of Australia, we need to educate and have the oncologists at the local level, at regional areas and rural areas, absolutely involved in the care, and having a proper framework set up around that so that patients aren't burdened. And interestingly, Aviral, here it's actually, PRRT is outpatient. So we've got that added bonus for the healthcare system, and for any policymakers who might be hearing, that is a cost saving, but it is, I guess it is testament, obviously, not only to the centres, but also just to that importance of that shared care model to ensure that when they do go home, fully equipped with all the information.
Yes, absolutely, because your experience having been diagnosed in Sydney or Melbourne and having easy access to the centres of excellence is going to be very different for regional and rural patients, and the financial toxicity involved, especially on an outpatient basis. This is huge. Is it something that you have plans for, Simone? Have a strategy to alleviate for these patients?
So we do have a plan for that, Rachel. We are launching the first ever national action plan for neuroendocrine tumours, and really brings together our 10 years plus experience and much of the research that we've done with incredible clinicians and patient organisations from around the world, and ENET centres of excellence, and around quality of life and access, as well as the actual clinical science as well. And so we're really focusing on 8 key areas. I like to, put as much in there as possible, but we really could only hone it down to 8 key areas. And that is the importance of the telehealth nurses, to ensure that they are that conduit between the centres and the community care. So our telehealth nurses are really, really important. And, we're only asking for 5. We have about 22,000 plus patients in Australia living with neuroendocrine tumours. And I actually heard the other day that's sort of around the same as MS and HIV, the amount of patients that are actually living with those diseases too. So, it is, when you're looking at it as the whole collective of neuroendocrine tumours, we are less common, but not necessarily rare. And so we really do need that supportive service of telehealth nurses. We're not asking 1 for 1. We're asking 1 per state, just to really ensure that those patients don't slip through the net. We're also looking at, really educating the healthcare professionals. As Aviral mentioned, it was a little mention in when they were studying medicine. We've developed accredited RACGP education modules, which is a category 1 CPD points, so which is fantastic. And we're educating nurses. We're doing all of that role through in-services and everything that we can do. So we need support for that. A national awareness campaign around the symptoms and what this disease is absolutely key, because obviously we know it's misdiagnosed for on average 5+ years because of that lack of awareness. One of the really amazing things that has come out of a lot of the advocacy work that happened at the start of this year was, for the first time, the development of the Optimal Care Pathway, which is a federal government endorsed and Cancer Australia endorsed pathway. So that's really going to help our patients and help with the awareness at that primary healthcare level. So we're really excited about that, but we can't have that without all these other things going on as well. And one of the other key areas is our registry. We have a data registry with a patient-reported outcomes app that is in 5 centres around the country, which is a fantastic achievement, but it needs, again, data. We need support. And the other thing we're asking for, just one last thing, because it's, that's how, whilst we're in there, we may as well keep on asking our wish list. And that is for targeted research through the Medical Research Future Fund into not only neuroendocrine tumours, but actually Theranostics. It's, again, been a category that hasn't had much care. I think it's been misunderstood potentially by grant givers, grant funders. And we saw that firsthand when we had to fully fund the Control Nets trial, which Aviral is probably aware of the Control Nets trial, which looked at combination therapy of PRRT with CAPTEM chemotherapy in G1 and G2 midgut and pancreatic nets patients. And whilst globally that was looked upon as a trial that would change practice, our principal investigator, Nick Pavlakis, was, rejected 5 times through our grant funding. I'm hoping now that that's not the case. I'm hoping now that there is more interest in this space and that we can get these really innovative combination trials. I think Aviral will agree, we're sort of beyond monotherapy with lutetium in nets. We need everything thrown at it because it isn't curative. It provides incredible quality of life and it is well tolerated. However, it's our best we have, but how can we make it better? And I think, immunotherapy, there's PARP inhibitors, there's all sorts of things that can be thrown at it. And I think that's where I believe Australia could really, take the lead. So that's our 8 key things,
Lots of work to do, but it must be exciting in some respects, knowing that there is such huge possibilities, but I guess also frustrating that you keep coming up against so many barriers, particularly around grant funding and things like that. Aviral, you're quite new in your role at GenesisCare and your research management. What are your plans? What is the future of the clinical trials landscape in Australia looking like, do you think?
So, as Simone has already mentioned, that there is great hope and lots of planned research, lots of research which is currently actually active and lots that needs to be pursued. So I must say that in general, the clinical trial scenario for Theranostics has significantly improved over the past several years, both in the field of NET and now in prostate cancer. So initially following the success of NET trial, significant industry-led trials such as the COMPETE, the COMPOSE trials have begun, which, as Simone mentioned, it's not just about whether PRRT is feasible, but it's about placing PRRT in the right position in the algorithm of patient management, combination care, and not just as last resort. When things have failed, patients have severe side effects, poor quality of life, and they say, let's try this. So that has to change. And that will only change with the help of clinical trials. If today, say, for example, one looks into the clinicaltrials.gov USA website, NIH website, so you'd see at least, I think, over 100 clinical trials, single center, multi-center, whatever that may be, but prospective and registered clinical trials, which are active or recruiting or open. And in prostate cancer, or if you say mixed, for PSMA trials, that means that would include both diagnostics as well as therapy. There'd be over 350 at least if you look into it. So everybody is making an effort towards the right direction. So as you said, I am new in the role, and that is true. I haven't actually had the chance to actively practice Theranostics here. But I believe, of course, Peter Mac has led several clinical trials, but I believe I'm in the right place choosing GenesisCare, and will be based at the North Shore Health Hub, which I think, in my perspective, and in collaboration with radiopharmaceutical companies like the Telix or Clarity that I've come into touch with since I've come here, and that's not to advertise anyone, but just to say my experience in the couple of weeks that I've been here. So these are the people who are actually, in my perspective and in my sphere, collaborating with us to pursue things forward. And very interestingly, the PSMA product from Telix has just been approved by the TGA, which is brilliant, because what one has to understand is that it is not just approved for recurrence, which is approved in EU. And I just gave a lecture recently, so I know very well that the European Association of Urology and Associates have permitted or allowed imaging with gallium-68 PSMA in case of biochemical recurrence, based on the evidence so far. However, recent research has actually shown that it is also beneficial for initial definitive treatment. We didn't have sufficient data till now. But if you see, this product is now also approved by the TGA for initial staging, because it is very important for these patients were, say, in prostate cancer, patients who were initially being imaged only locally. So in 2016, I attended a seminar a urological seminar in Turkey, where they were saying focused imaging, focused therapy, and they were looking at just the pelvic region or abdominal region for prostate patients. So technically speaking, I'm sorry to say that for certain factions of our community, the prostate cancer patient did not exist above the diaphragm. And with gallium-68 imaging, and then we see, of course, we got patients late. We saw metastases from head to toe. Just name it, and they were there. All right. Of course, it is important that research takes place. Theranostics finds its right place in the current setting. And as Simone has already mentioned, there are several factors complicating the approvals of such things. There's radiation protection. There's radiation burden to the patient. There are radiation protection regulations. There is simply the concept of when I tell someone, my specialty, what do you do? Nuclear medicine. Oh my God, is that scary? Hold on. But what do you really do? Then you say, oh, Theranostics. What's that? Never heard of it. Well, my dear, most doctors haven't heard of it. You are still a layperson. So I think the steps that are being taken in my position or in my role from GenesisCare, from Simone's point of view, the Neuroendocrine Society, the radiopharmaceutical companies, everybody, institutions, large centers have to come together, educate, collaborate, make data registries. Data registries are very important, whether it be prospective or retrospective data. Retrospective data from prostate cancer studies actually led to the success of the German multi-center study, which I did speak in my lecture on Theranostics Roundtable, which then led to the Loop-PSMA trial from Peter Mac, and then the Vision trial. So success comes with time, with effort. From everything that we have, we put it into the box. It's a cumulative effort, and I think there's exciting times ahead, hard times ahead, but promising times ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you. I should mention actually for our listeners that Aviral is not long off the plane. In fact, he's just come out of his hotel quarantine. So I'm sure you will see him practicing soon. Simone, before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you about the HTA framework, because you did mention that. Is that something you see as a priority that we need to make some changes?
Look, I absolutely think so. I mean, it's encouraging what the news through with the TGA approval. Recently, MSAC also approved for the imaging also for prostate PSMA. Whilst that is really encouraging, I think that we've still got a way to go, because that's still looking at the imaging. We really need to ensure that the imaging and the therapy go together. We can't have one without the other. And many companies now are actually, not just focusing on imaging and not, as Aviral mentioned, with Clarity, they've got the copper 64 with the imaging, with the copper 67 therapy. That's the way of the future. So how does that fit into a system where we have the TGA, we have MSAC looking at imaging, we have PBAC looking at medicines and drugs, and as we know, this therapy is not a medicine or a drug. And so where does Theranostics fall? And I think that was one of the key things that we were really trying to really sort of thrash out last week, is what is the system and how can we set the system up for this? And this isn't different. This is sort of along the same lines as gene cell therapy, CAR T cell therapy. So these are all things that are coming down the line that are not fit for purpose in the current HTA system. And that's not just here in Australia. I think that's, globally. So, is it a parallel approval processes and reimbursement processes for these technologies? So what that holds, it is conversations upon conversations. And, we were grateful for the head of the TGA, Professor John Skerritt, to be on that roundtable. And we also had the head of MSAC, Professor Robin Ward, also on that panel. It is an interesting paradigm, I think, but it's a conversation that we constantly need to have. Hopefully, out of the House of Reps inquiry, we had also Dr. Michael Friedlander, who was one of the co-chairs of that inquiry, one of the solutions panel last week. And he did say that there's the recommendations will be reporting soon. They have listened, and I think that we will see change happening. I think it is, as Aviral said, I think that it is the future is bright as long as we just don't take our foot off the pedal. I might be fooling myself, but I see nuclear medicine and I see it as not a scary thing. I see it as a really exciting thing. You know, we have the likes of Ansto. We have the likes of, these innovators being able to actually manufacture and actually run the clinical trials and then get the access to the patients. And what I was excited to hear about last week was, you know, the byproducts can also be used in therapy. So, you know, this is a full circle sort of solution. And as we're at the climate change conference and, you know, I don't think nuclear medicine is seen as such a bad thing if we're trying to get to net zero. So potentially there's all sorts of benefits that we could really be looking at with not only medical innovations, but potentially, you know, environment, you know, innovations as well. And I think Australia is in a really good position to do that as long as they're not afraid to. I think we need to really have some key policy makers who have a little bit of drive and a little bit of courage to do that.
I agree with you. I think it's very exciting. Theranostics and all these nuclear medicine advances, of course, take me back to my teenage years of watching Star Trek, you know, and the incredible medicines. And I really do feel like within our lifetime, things are going to change so incredibly. But absolutely, we need to make sure that the right people are in the right place and they have that courage to see it through. Do you have any resources that you'd like to mention, Simone, before we go?
We've just produced some animated videos, which we're really excited about. So we'll be launching them in the next couple of days, along with the National Action Plan that we'll be launching on World Net Cancer Day, November 10th. Please go to our website. We have some really important videos around what is PRRT and, you know, patients actually talking about their experience. And we have some really great videos on the process of how to, you know, what the patient goes through when they go into the hospital for the first time and what is that process of the therapy as well, which I think is something that patients really appreciate because it can be daunting, but I think they've really, really appreciated. So that's all on our website, neuroendocrine.org.au.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we include links to those so that clinicians have those resources ready to be able to share with their patients. Aviral, do you have a take-home message that you'd like to share?
Sure. I think we've spoken about most things and in which way we must progress and educate people. Research is important. Collaboration is important. Patient and healthcare worker awareness is important. And I think a more net patient days or teaching days would be a good idea to organize. I mean, we used to do that at our center quite a lot or regularly, I must say. But having said everything, I would like to end with a quote saying that Theranostics actually provides a comparatively safer, targeted, and individualized option for the management of cancer patients. Although mostly known for and practiced in the management of low-grade neuroendocrine tumors and advanced stage prostate cancer, its applications are much diverse and reach out to several adenocarcinomas with a grim prognosis and other non-malignant conditions as well. So all I would say is look out. We are coming. Watch the future.
Coming for you.
in the right way.
In the right way.
With a smile.
With a smile.
Well, thank you both for your time today. It's been really interesting. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
You've been listening to the Oncology Podcast. If you enjoyed today's edition and would like to subscribe, head over to our website, oncologynews.com.au, and sign up to our newsletter. Thanks for listening.